right, ready to do a deep dive on ECMO oxygenation today.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be focusing on this idea of hidden hyperoxia.
Okay.
We're taking a look at these 2 LinkedIn articles by Jonathan Young, ECMO Specialist. He kind of breaks down this silent threat and how we can, all be better ECMO professionals.
Yeah, it's such an important topic. And, Jung's insights, especially that breakdown of the oxygenation during veno-arterial extracorporeal membrane oxygenation review article, I think that's really got people talking in the ECMO world.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as ECMO specialists, we're always trying to find that balance with oxygenation, right?
Absolutely.
So let's dig into that.
Okay.
Because I think, one of the things that Jung does really well is he starts by talking about this case study, right, from his own practice, this seemingly stable patient on VA-ECMO. But when they did the post-oxygenator blood gas,
right,
the PO2 was over 300 millimeters of mercury.
Yeah, and that's a huge red flag. Even if, everything else looks normal, you see a number like that. That's definitely concerning.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving when you see that. And I think that's, it's a good reminder that we can't just rely on standard ABGs, right?
Yeah.
Or even radial oxygen sats.
Exactly.
We need to be looking at that post-oxygenator blood gas monitoring.
And that's, I think, what's really key here, right? When everything else seems fine on the surface,
right,
that direct measurement that we're getting from the circuit,
yeah,
it's really giving us that much clearer picture of what's actually happening.
Yeah, it's like we need to be these, detectives almost, right?
Yeah.
Looking for these clues that otherwise might go unnoticed.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think, one of the things that this reviewed article that he talks about really kind of drives home is just how common yet potentially dangerous this hyperoxia can be.
Right.
And they say some studies show that 30%
up to 30%
of VA-ECMO patients experience severe hyperoxia.
Wow.
With a PO2 over 300. So those are some pretty alarming statistics, right?
Yeah.
So, what are the implications then for patient outcomes when we're seeing this?
Yeah, so this review, along with other research, right, what it's showing is that there is a strong link between hyperoxia and an increased risk of death in the hospital. And that's even after you consider just how sick ECMO patients are, right?
So even after adjusting for those other factors.
Adjusting for those factors, it's still independently associated with a worse outcome.
Wow. That's really something. And it's not just mortality, right?
No, not at all.
We're also talking about hyperoxia can really impact different organ systems.
It can.
We're talking neurological damage, worsened reperfusion injury, increased inflammation. That's not what we want.
No, not at all. And it's like that saying, too much of a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. We think of oxygen as this life-sustaining, thing that we need.
Right, of course.
But this research shows how damaging it can be when you have too much.
Right, absolutely. And I think, Jung, he really kind of hits on this this potential impact on the gut, on the lower limbs.
Yeah.
Especially with peripheral cannulation. It makes you think, well, you're bypassing the lungs' natural filtering process.
Right.
So that blood with that high PO2 is going right to those areas.
It is, and that's something that we need to be aware of, right? That balance that we need to find with oxygen titration.
Yeah.
We have to be really mindful of both extremes, the hyperoxia and the hypoxia.
It's like we're trying to thread this needle.
Yeah.
Right? Between too much and too little.
Absolutely.
So how do we find that sweet spot? What are some, strategies that are out there or that you found successful in managing these oxygen levels in these really complex patients?
Right. So they offer some concrete things, right? So they recommend shooting for a post-oxygenator PO2 between 150 and 300.
Okay. So we're finding that middle ground.
So we're not just fixated on this one number, right?
Exactly, because every patient's different.
Right.
What works for one may not work for another. So it's about that individualized care.
Right. So we're looking at a range and we're, paying attention to the needs of the individual patient.
Absolutely.
Okay. So 150 to 300 post-oxygenator PO2. And they also, I think they talk about, radial oxygen sats.
Right. So they recommend keeping those between 94 and 98%.
Okay. So that gives us, I guess, another data point.
Exactly.
Right, to help guide that. So it's really interesting because, it's like we're moving away from this idea that more oxygen is always better.
Oh, yeah.
And we're really trying to be more nuanced.
Yeah, more nuanced and using the tools we have available to us, like the air oxygen blender.
Right.
to fine-tune that delivery
Okay.
and keep those levels where they need to be.
So it really is this tightrope walk.
Yeah, it is. It's a delicate dance.
Yeah. And that's why that continuous monitoring is so important.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. ECMO patients, their conditions can change so quickly.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to be ready to adapt.
Right. So we've kind of talked about the dangers of this hidden hyperoxia.
Right.
We've talked about close monitoring, individualizing the oxygen titration.
Yep.
But how do we, as, ECMO specialists, make sure that we are at the top of our game when when you're dealing with this?
Well, that's where I think Jung's second article really comes in.
Okay.
Targeting excellence as an ECMO specialist, a path to growth. He really breaks down those qualities and skills that set those exceptional specialists apart. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Especially for those newer to the field.
So this is like a kind of a roadmap for, career development.
Exactly.
In the ECMO world.
A roadmap. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And it all starts, with a really solid foundation. That knowledge of ECMO circuits, patient management, emergency procedures, you got to have that base.
So that's the groundwork for everything, right?
It is, but it doesn't stop there.
Right.
He talks about attention to detail.
Okay.
Because things can change so quickly in this field.
Right. What might seem small could be something much more serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the communication,
right.
The teamwork aspect.
Yeah, because we're talking about a whole team here, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's multidisciplinary nurses, perfusionists, respiratory therapists, physicians.
Right. Everyone's got to be on the same page.
Everyone's got to be on the same page.
Yeah. Like an orchestra, right?
It is.
Everyone has to be playing their part or it all falls apart.
Exactly. And if one section's out of tune,
right,
it throws the whole thing off.
Right. And I think, this also speaks to what Jung talks about with problem solving.
Yes.
Right. Being able to think critically under pressure, making sound judgments in real time.
And that's a tough one, right?
Oh, for sure.
That's a tough one.
Because, when you're managing a patient on ECMO, things can go sideways pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
In a heartbeat.
You got to be able to think on your feet.
You do. And I really appreciate that he also highlights that empathy piece,
Oh, absolutely. That human connection with the patient and the family. That's huge.
And I think that's what sets those exceptional specialists apart. These are people going through an incredibly challenging time.
Of course.
And being able to connect with them on a human level, build that trust, provide that compassionate care, that's key.
Absolutely, because, at the end of the day, we're not just managing machines here.
We're not. We're caring for human beings.
Exactly.
With families and lives and...
Right. And I think that's so important to keep in mind.
It is.
So we talked about the qualities, what it takes to be an exceptional ECMO specialist.
Mm-hmm.
How does someone, especially someone who's maybe newer to the field, actually work towards that?
Mm-hmm.
What are some tangible things that they can do?
Well, it's a journey, right? Not a destination.
Oh.
He really breaks it down into these actionable steps.
Okay.
And it starts, of course, with continuous education,
right,
conferences, courses, simulations, anything to keep those skills sharp.
Yeah, because what we knew 5 years ago is probably outdated now.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
The field is constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
And then beyond just, absorbing information,
right,
he talks about seeking feedback.
Okay.
Having mentors, getting that constructive criticism.
Yeah, because you need that outside perspective.
You do.
Right, to see what you might be missing.
Absolutely. Yeah, those blind spots that we all have.
Right, exactly.
And, he's a huge advocate for simulation.
Oh, yeah.
Simulation training.
That's so important.
It's such a valuable tool.
It is, because it allows you to, practice these high-stakes scenarios.
Right, in a safe environment.
In a safe environment.
Exactly. You can make those mistakes
out.
without those real-world consequences.
That's where you can really develop those critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the teamwork.
Right, and that teamwork, yeah.
Because when the pressure's on...
Yeah, and things can go south pretty fast.
They can. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat, as we know.
Absolutely.
So that's where that simulation is so valuable, especially for those newer ECMO specialists.
Right, to build their confidence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They've been there before, even if it was just,
right,
a practice scenario.
Right. He also talks about communication and teamwork, which I think
huge
is so important in this field.
It's absolutely.
Because we're talking about...
It's a multidisciplinary specialty.
Multidisciplinary, right.
Yeah, and that communication is crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when it comes to this oxygen management.
Right.
We need everyone, like we said, the nurses, the perfusionists,
right,
respiratory therapists, the physicians. Everybody's got to be in the loop.
Yeah. And on the same page.
On the same page, exactly.
Because a breakdown in communication, especially in this kind of setting,
oh my gosh,
can have,
yeah,
big consequences.
huge consequences.
Right. And, think about that case study he talked about.
Right.
The patient seems stable,
Right.
but the post-oxygenator blood gas was telling a very different story.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of
Right.
why that communication is key.
Right. So everyone knows, okay,
Yeah.
we need to be looking out for this.
Be aware of that potential for that
Yeah.
hidden hyperoxia.
Right. And that we need to be
And that we need to be monitored.
monitoring for it. Exactly.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. So it's about shifting that mindset from
Yeah.
more oxygen is always better
Yeah.
to let's find the right amount of oxygen.
And that takes communication.
Yes, absolutely.
It really does. Sharing that information.
And not just, the numbers.
Right. Not just the vital signs, but
Right. But what you're thinking,
what we're thinking, our concerns. Yeah.
your concerns.
Any of those subtle changes that we see.
Right. So it's not even just about speaking up. It's about really listening
Yes.
and being open
Being open.
to those different perspectives.
That's different perspectives.
Right.
Absolutely. And advocating for our patients.
To all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for, coming on this journey with us
Yes.
into the world of ECMO.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've learned some things, that you feel inspired to, keep pushing the boundaries in this field. And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for excellence in everything that you do.